She was young, 6 months pregnant, and just weeks away from finishing college. But the man she trusted, her own boss, turned her final weekend into a nightmare. What happened next didn't just take 2 lives. What really happened in that hotel room? It changed the law across America. Why did no one help her? And how could the man who did it almost walk free? Alisha was born on August 28, 1990, in Joliet, Illinois. She was 21 years old, full of dreams, grew up in a loving family with 4 siblings. Independent and strong-willed, she never liked burdening others with her problems. If something went wrong, she handled it herself. That independence became her trademark, even as life kept throwing challenges her way. By 2012, she was nearing the end of her studies at Western Illinois University. Majoring in criminology, her dream was to work in criminal justice or forensic psychology. But life had taken an unexpected turn. Alisha was pregnant. The father of her child had walked away, refusing responsibility, leaving her to face motherhood alone. Still, she refused to let that break her spirit. At 6.5 months pregnant, she had already picked out a name for her baby girl, Ava Lucille. She had decorated a little nursery, bought tiny clothes, and planned out everything she'd need. She was ready to be a mom. The due date was just a couple of months away, and she was counting the days. Her plan was simple: take maternity leave, finish her exams, and then return to work once Ava was old enough. Alisha worked at the Home Depot Garden Center, where she'd started as a teenager. She loved that job. The flowers, the creative arrangements, the customers. It was her happy place. But behind that cheerful environment was a dark shadow, a man named Brian Cooper. Brian Cooper was her boss, a 36-year-old regional manager who had known Alisha since she was in high school. At first, he seemed like a decent mentor. He'd schedule her shifts around classes, offer advice, and act like he cared about her career. But over time, his behavior changed. The line between professional and personal blurred, and soon, Cooper began to push that boundary further and further. He started flirting, making comments that made her uncomfortable. He'd introduce her to new employees as his girlfriend, even though they were never together. When she tried to keep things strictly work-related, he'd get angry. He'd watch who she talked to, especially male coworkers, and punish her by cutting her breaks or hours. In private, he'd corner her, try to kiss her, always reminding her he was her boss. At first, Alisha hoped he'd stop. She needed that job. She was pregnant, and no one was going to hire a woman due in 3 months. She told friends and family, "I just need to keep this job." So she endured. She avoided being alone with him, adjusted her hours, and made it clear she wasn't interested. But Brian Cooper wasn't the kind of man who could take no for an answer. When Alisha finally filed formal complaints about the harassment, she detailed everything: the outbursts, the threats, the inappropriate behavior. Home Depot's management did nothing meaningful. They told Cooper to take anger management classes and left it at that. No suspension, no follow-up, no protection. And the harassment didn't stop. He continued to make her life miserable, making sure she knew he still had power over her. Other women later said they'd gone through similar experiences under him, and the company ignored them too. Alisha felt trapped. She needed the income. She needed the stability for Ava. So she stayed, trying to push through until maternity leave. Then came August 2012, the trip that would change everything. Brian Cooper told Alisha he wanted her to go with him to his sister's wedding in Door County, Wisconsin, about 6 hours away. He said it wasn't personal, just a work-related favor, and that she'd have her own room. Alisha refused at first, uncomfortable with the idea of traveling with him. But Cooper used his position again, threatening to cut her hours or fire her if she didn't come. She couldn't risk it. Reluctantly, she agreed, but made it clear. Separate rooms. On August 18th, they set out for the trip. When they arrived at the Sand Bay Beach Resort, Alisha found out that Cooper had lied. He'd booked only one room, with a single double bed. Furious, she texted her mother, Sherry, saying she wanted to leave and that Cooper had deceived her again. Cooper apologized, saying it was just a mix-up with the hotel, and convinced her to stay for the wedding, promising nothing would happen. So she stayed. That evening, she attended the wedding ceremony, watched Cooper walk his sister down the aisle, and tried to stay polite for the sake of appearances. Later, she texted her mom again, saying they'd stay the night and head back in the morning. Everything seemed calm, but deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling of unease. After the wedding, they returned to the hotel. Alisha was exhausted and wanted to sleep. Cooper, however, kept drinking. He had been drinking heavily all day, and by the early hours of August 19th, his intoxication had turned into rage. He confronted Alisha, asking her to be with him, not as co-workers, but as a couple. She refused. Firmly, she told him it was over, that she didn't want him in her life anymore. That refusal broke him. Drunk, angry, and obsessed, Cooper snapped. He lunged at Alisha, strangling her with his hands. She fought back, tried to break free, but he was stronger. Experts later said it lasted about 5 minutes. 5 long, unbearable minutes as this young, pregnant woman struggled to breathe, begging him to stop. But he didn't. When it was over, Alisha was gone. And so was her unborn daughter, Ava. But Cooper wasn't done. He undressed her, saying later that he had always wanted to see her like that. What he did next was vile, a final violation after taking her life. When it was over, he panicked. He realized what he had done. He tried to end his own life, first with a knife, then by drowning himself, but couldn't go through with it. Wet and terrified, he drove to a nearby gas station and asked to use their phone, and at around 2 a.m., he called 911. On that call, he confessed, "I killed my pregnant coworker last night." When police arrived, they found Cooper trembling and soaked. They handcuffed him and took him into custody. At the hotel, investigators found Alisha's body on the floor, partially covered by a blanket. There were bruises on her neck and defensive wounds on her hands. She had fought to live, but he didn't let her. A pillow had been placed under her head as if Cooper was trying to show some twisted sign of remorse. But the truth was, nothing could undo what he had done. Back at the station, Cooper gave a full confession. He told detectives everything, how she had rejected him, how he lost control, and how he tried to kill himself afterward. He admitted he had been obsessed with her for years. When investigators searched his home and devices, they found disturbing evidence, hidden cameras. He had secretly filmed Alisha at his house when she used to pet sit his dog, placing a camera in the bathroom. He had also planted one in the hotel room where he murdered her, recording her private moments. On his phone, his lock screen code was her birthday. Everything about him screamed obsession. The horror of that night would later expose deep flaws, not just in the justice system, but in the workplace system that allowed Cooper's abuse to continue unchecked. When police called Alisha's mother, Sherry, her world collapsed. She had received texts from her daughter just hours earlier. Now, she was gone. As investigators gathered evidence and the confession, one thing became painfully clear. This wasn't a random act of violence. When Brian Cooper confessed, there was no mystery left about who killed Alisha Bromfield. But what followed in court would shake her family all over again. After his arrest, Cooper was charged with 2 counts of first-degree intentional homicide, one for Alisha and one for her unborn daughter. The evidence was overwhelming. His 911 call, his full confession, the hidden cameras, and the history of harassment, everything pointed to him. But Cooper wasn't ready to take responsibility. His lawyers came up with a strategy that disgusted everyone. They claimed that he was too drunk to know what he was doing, that he was so intoxicated during the attack that he couldn't form intent to kill. The prosecutors called it what it was, an excuse. They showed how Cooper described every step of his actions in clear, deliberate detail. He remembered the fight, the strangling, and even the order of events afterward. That wasn't confusion. It was control. The trial began in 2013, and Alisha's family sat in court day after day, listening to Cooper's defense team argue that alcohol somehow made him less guilty. They played his 911 call, his recorded confession, his statements about wanting to see her naked. The words sent shivers through the courtroom. But despite all of that, the jury couldn't agree. 2 jurors believed his intoxication meant he didn't truly understand what he was doing. And because of that, the judge declared a mistrial for Alisha's mother, Sherry. It was a nightmare all over again. She couldn't believe what she was hearing, that a man could kill her pregnant daughter, admit it, and still escape a conviction because he was drunk. It was beyond injustice. It was betrayal. Sherry refused to stay silent. She took her grief and turned it into a mission. She began writing letters to anyone who would listen: politicians, journalists, advocacy groups. She started petitions, shared Alisha's story online, and spoke publicly about the failure of the justice system. Her goal was simple: make sure no one could ever use voluntary intoxication as a defense for murder again. And slowly, people started listening. News outlets covered the case. Lawmakers began to take notice. Sherry's determination became impossible to ignore. While the legal fight continued, Cooper sat in jail awaiting retrial. But for Sherry, it wasn't just about him anymore. It was about every victim whose killer tried to hide behind a bottle. Then, in 2014, something extraordinary happened. The governor of Wisconsin signed a bill, a new law inspired directly by Alisha's case. The law stated that voluntary intoxication could no longer be used as a defense in criminal cases. It was called Alisha's Law. The change spread beyond Wisconsin. Over the next few years, 31 other states introduced or strengthened similar laws. One mother's fight changed how justice worked across the country. Meanwhile, Cooper's second trial began in May 2014. This time, prosecutors came prepared. They didn't just show the evidence. They showed the obsession. They played Cooper's own words. They showed the footage from his hidden cameras, the photos, the text messages, and the sick patterns of control. Witnesses from Home Depot testified about how Cooper harassed Alisha, how he insulted her in front of coworkers, how he used his position to threaten her. They confirmed that Alisha had reported him multiple times, and nothing was ever done. Every piece of evidence painted the same picture: a man who believed he owned her, and a system that failed to protect her. The defense tried once more to suggest that alcohol played a role, but this time no one was buying it. The jury saw the truth: not a man out of control, but a man consumed by obsession. After hours of deliberation, they reached a verdict: guilty on all counts. On July 24, 2014, Brian Cooper was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. he would spend the rest of his life behind bars. When the verdict was read, Sherry cried, not from joy, but from relief. Justice had taken too long, but it had finally come. After the trial, Sherry filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Home Depot and the associated companies that employed Cooper. She argued that they ignored her daughter's repeated complaints and allowed a predator to continue working unchecked. Even today, the story of Alisha Bromfield isn't just a murder case. It's a symbol of how one woman's life and one mother's pain changed the law for an entire nation. Sherry once said, "I couldn't save my daughter, but maybe I can save someone else's." And she did. Because of her, no one can now claim, "I was too drunk to know I was killing someone." If you are still watching, please hit the like button. It won't cost you anything, but helps us a lot. And if you want to see more true crime stories like this, make sure you subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.